Cascadia was born of fire and ice. This string of 19 volcanic peaks stretch from Canada to California. Sulfur, lava, ocean mist, evergreens, and fog commingle to create one of the world's most haunting, mysterious realms. Rumor has it a subterranean network of lava tubes connect the mountains out of eyeshot. From ancient alien civilizations to Sasquatch to legends of the Watchers to underground libraries gilt in gold to unexplained missing persons, Curious Cat is exploring the origins of these dark rumors in pursuit of truth. Yes, folks, lace up your hiking boots. We are venturing into the woods of the Cascade Mountain Range. Find all Cascadia episodes on your regular Curious Cat stream. Special season art was created by Nora's Unnamed Photos. Follow them on Instagram to keep up with their latest designs and purchase their art. To say I know Mount St. Helens intimately is an understatement. I've breathed bits of her into my lungs and nostrils. I filtered her ash through my 10-year-old fingers and collected cups of her for God knows what reason after her epic 1980 eruption. Legends about the mountain stretch back thousands of years to her human life as a goddess, tell of the men that fought for her heart and the devastating results of that. She is volatile, romantic, squatchy, topless, and some geologists describe her as antisocial. Geographic features near the peak are curiously named Ape Cave, Ape Valley, and Spirit Lake. It is 43 years to the day when Mount St. Helens erupted, the perfect moment to shine a spotlight on her. Let's get into it. Mount St. Helens rests in the southwest corner of Washington state, 97 miles south of Seattle and 52 miles north of Portland, Oregon. Prior to her eruption, she was the fifth highest peak in Washington and had a conical-shaped cap, earning her the nickname Mount Fuji of America. In 1792, Captain George Vancouver named the volcano for Britain's ambassador to Spain, Elaine Fitzherbert, also known as Barren St. Helens, though native peoples named the mountain thousands of years before, Lou Witt. During the past 4,000 years, Mount St. Helens has erupted more frequently than any other volcano in the Cascade Range. Since 1986, snow and rock accumulating in the deep, shaded crater form Crater Glacier. It's the youngest glacier on Earth. Mount St. Helens? She's shrinking. A 2009 survey shows that Mount St. Helens' height has reduced significantly. A 1982 survey measured the summit of the volcano mountain at 9,677 feet tall, but as of 2009, it measured roughly about 8,300 feet. So more than 1,300 feet was taken off the top of the volcanic mountain. The shrinkage could most likely have been a result of erosion and constant collapses of the crater walls. Mount St. Helens remains a world-famous natural lab for the study of Earth's processes and also nature's response to catastrophe. Did you know that Mount St. Helens is antisocial? From Live Science, Mount St. Helens sits about 40 miles or 64 kilometers west of all other Cascade volcanoes in the region, like Mount Adams and Mount Rainier, to name a few. Researchers have figured out why. Deep in the Earth's crust, a plug of cooled igneous or volcanic rock keeps magma from surfacing between Mount St. Helens and the rest of the volcanic arc. Meanwhile, the crust under Mount St. Helens consists of an ancient scar caused by two continental plates slamming together. The scar serves almost like a soda straw, and it's allowing these deeper magmas to preferentially ascend to the surface, said Paul Bedrosian, a geophysicist at the U.S. Geological Survey in Lakewood, Colorado, and a co-author of a new study on the region published September 3rd in the journal Nature Geosciences. Mount St. Helens is weird, not just because of its westerly location, but also because it erupts this thicker, stickier magma than other Cascade volcanoes, and because it's the most restless mountain of the bunch, Bedrosian told Live Science. But why? Right under Mount St. Helens, Bedrosian said, the scientists discovered what's known as metasedimentary rock, detectable because it conducts electricity really well. This type of rock started out as seafloor sediments and was then transformed under pressure when its portion of the Juan de Fuca plate slipped under the North American plate about 40 million or even 50 million years ago. The geometry of this metasedimentary rock provides an easy path by which magma can slip toward the surface, Bedrosian finished. One last fun fact, Mount St. Helens erupted, losing a third of her mass in a matter of hours. I promise to go deeper into the eruption later on. First, though, here's one of countless legends Native peoples have told about Mount St. Helens for almost 1,000 years. It's the legend of the Bridge of the Gods. I share the following tale in love for every tribe of the Native peoples. There are nuances to this story. Some details intersect and others differ. But the one commonality is that the name of Mount St. Helens was westernized. Her ancient name is Luwit, which you'll find spelled in different ways by different tribes. So Luwit was once a mortal woman. She tended the eternal fire that sat at the arch of the Bridge of the Gods, a natural rock bridge that spanned the Columbia River at the Cascade Mountain intersection. Geologists have since found evidence that natural bridge, of course, once existed, as conveyed in the native oral tradition, and indeed collapsed somewhere around the year 1598. According to the lore of the Puyallup people, long ago, a huge landslide of rocks roared into the Columbia River near Cascade Locks and eventually formed that natural stone bridge that spanned the river. The bridge came to be called Tamanawas, or Bridge of the Gods. In the center of that arch burned the only fire in the world, so of course the site was sacred to early ancestors. They came from north, south, west, and east to get embers for their own fires from the sacred fire. A wrinkled old woman, Luwit, lived in the center of the arch, and she tended the fire. Luwit was so faithful in her task and so kind to the ancestors who came for fire that she was noticed by the great chief Tai Sahale, or in some tellings, Manitou. He had a gift he had given to very few others, and it was a gift he bestowed on Luwit, which was eternal life. Luwit wept at the gift because she did not want to live forever as an old woman. Sahale could not take back the gift, but he told Luwit he could grant her one wish. Her wish was to be young and beautiful, and he granted it, and the fame of her wondrous beauty spread far and wide. One day, Wais came from the land of the Multnomas in the south to see Luwit. Just as he arrived at Tamanawas Bridge, his brother Klickitat came thundering down from the north. Both brothers fell madly in love with Luwit, but she could not choose between them. Klickitat and Wais had a tremendous fight. They burned villages, whole forests disappeared in flames. Sahale watched all of this fury and became very furious himself. He frowned. He smote Tamawana's bridge, and it fell in the river, where it still boils in angry protest. He smote the three lovers too, but even as he punished them, he loved them. So where each lover fell, he raised up a mighty mountain. Because Luwit was beautiful, her mountain, St. Helens, was a symmetrical cone, dazzling white. Wais Mountain was Mount Hood, and it still lifts its head in pride. Klickitat, for all his rough ways, had a tender heart. As Mount Adams, he bends his head in sorrow, weeping to see the beautiful maiden Luwit wrapped in snow. Again, as I said, there were nuances to this tale by other tribes, and I tried to incorporate those in this telling. It's probably time to talk about the elephant in the room, the major eruption of Mount St. Helens. On May 18, 1980, a major volcanic eruption occurred at Mount St. Helens. a volcano located in Skamania County in Washington State. The eruption, a VEI-5 event, was the most significant volcanic eruption to occur in the contiguous 48 U.S. states since the much smaller 1915 eruption of Lassen Peak, which is to the south in California. It has often been declared the most disastrous volcanic eruption in U.S. history. The eruption was preceded by a 2-month series of earthquakes and steam venting episodes caused by an injection of magma at shallow depth below the volcano that created a large bulge and a fracture system on the mountain's north slope. An earthquake at 8:32 a.m. on Sunday, May 18th, caused the entire weakened north face to slide away, creating the largest landslide ever recorded. This allowed the partly molten, high-pressure gas and steam-rich rock in the volcano to suddenly explode northwards towards Spirit Lake in a hot mix of lava and pulverized older rock, overtaking the avalanching phase. An eruption column rose 80,000 feet into the atmosphere and deposited ash in 11 U.S. states and significant ash in 2 Canadian provinces. At the same time, snow, ice, and several entire glaciers on the volcano melted, forming a series of large lahars, or volcanic mudslides, that reached as far as the Columbia River, nearly 50 miles to the southwest. Less severe outbursts continued into the next day, only to be followed by other large but not as destructive eruptions later that year. Thermal energy released during the eruption was equal to 26 megatons. 57 souls passed that day, including innkeeper Harry R. Truman, photographers Reed Blackburn and Robert Landsberg, and geologist David A. Johnson. Hundreds of square miles were reduced to wasteland, causing over $1 billion in damage, equivalent to today's value at $3.3 billion. Thousands of animals were killed, and Mount St. Helens was left with a crater on its north side. At the time of the eruption, the summit of the volcano was owned by the Burlington Northern Railroad, but after the land passed to the United States Forest Service, the area was later preserved as it was in the Mount St. Helens National Volcanic Monument. I have a personal story about Mount St. Helens. I grew up in eastern Washington, so picture it, east of Mount St. Helens. I'm a short walk from the banks of the mighty Columbia, and up in the hills lies a shopping mall, and there's a Farrell's ice cream shop. There, a gaggle of preteen girls gathered to celebrate the birth of our friend, Bobby McPherson. I'm sure I was the most excited kid there. I'd taken, as the new kid in town, and it had taken me until May to be invited to anyone's party. Yeah, I'd always had someone to play kickball with at recess or do penny drops off the bars, but I hadn't been invited to an actual birthday celebration for anyone in my 4th grade class yet. As I was sitting in my mother's car, we crossed the Blue Bridge that spans the Columbia on that 15-minute drive to Farrell's. And all of us were admiring the carpet of gray ash pockets that hung heavy across the sky. It was strange and striking and odd, like a 2-headed lamb. Bobby McPherson's mother was a seer, apparently. She'd pre-ordered the volcano for the gathering, the most spectacular ice cream concoction to ever grace a Tri-Cities menu before or after. Looking back, I guess I should ask Mrs. McPherson for the lotto numbers. We sang, we celebrated, we gorged ourselves on sugar, and as we wandered into the parking lot in search of our rides home, ash rained down on our heads and shoulders like confetti. Garth's budgie parakeet Woodstock was a casualty of the eruption. He suffered what we guessed was a heart attack. His death would bring out the Aleister Crowley and my older brother, who'd, unbeknownst to the rest of us, built a pyramid around the stiff bird in an attempt to bring him back to life. It was unfortunate twice. First, at the end of a long, hot August, my mother was dusting Garth's room. When she lifted the black pyramid, she screamed, finding beneath a mummified Woodstock. And that was the second tragedy. The pyramid hadn't worked as hoped. We would scoop Mount St. Helens ash, storing it in styrofoam cups that we'd keep for years afterwards until, like Woodstock, it was chucked out. There were t-shirts inspired by the eruption on sale soon after. And a couple of the ones that I remember were, "It's a Blast, Mount St. Helens 1980, and I lost my ash on Mount St. Helens." I'm proud to say I didn't buy either of those. There are some incredible survivor stories that came out of that eruption. And one eruption survivor story that I'm going to read comes from Q13 Fox. It's titled, "It Haunts Me Right Now." The survivor remembers escaping Mount St. Helens. Looking at pictures of the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens takes William Dilley right back to his campsite near the mountain. "It haunts me right now," Dilley told Q13 News reporter John Hopperstad in 2016. "It was pretty tragic. Something as catastrophic as that sticks with you." 57 people were killed in what was known as the worst volcanic eruption in the United States. Dilley was camping with neighbors some 9 miles from Mount St. Helens when the mountain blew. They thought they were safe, but the cloud of ash and debris kept approaching, and Dilley watched it get closer and closer as they drove away as fast as they could. "There were people camping just on the other side of us, and unfortunately, they didn't make it," Dilley said. "When it came over the second ridge, I turned away because I didn't want to see it coming." Author Steve Olson published a book on Mount St. Helens. He says Mount St. Helens continues to capture the imagination of people around the world. What Mount St. Helens taught us is that we have to take these threats seriously, and we have to prepare for them because they are going to happen. Olson points out that in the years since the eruption, the knowledge scientists gleaned from St. Helens and the technology they've developed for early warning systems have saved thousands of lives in other countries. In 1980, a series of earthquakes warned scientists that the volcano may erupt, but the danger zone around the mountain turned out to be much too small. Saturday morning, there was an order on Governor Dixie Lee Ray's desk to extend the danger zone, Olson said. She was at a parade that weekend and did not sign the order. It was still waiting on her desk Monday morning after the eruption happened on Sunday. The collapse of the mountain's top created the largest landslide ever recorded. If we had been in any other area 500 yards either way, we would have been with the ghosts right now, said Dilley. It was that close. Dilley rarely looks at photographs from that day, and he hasn't been back to Mount St. Helens in all these years. Going through something catastrophic shows you how short life is and how precious things are. And for me, it's Mount St. Helens.
His Day of the Dead celebrations are 2 weeks long. He once used a Ouija board to correct its grammar. He once played chess with death. Death suggested they switch to checkers. If he ever mixes an old-fashioned for you, you'll be inspired to write a creepypasta about it. He is Edward October, the best horror narrator you've never heard of.
Horror stories don't always have to be scary. The best ones invoke a mood of foreboding and existential dread. Fear is fleeting. I prefer to be haunted.
For retro horror of impeccable taste, listen to October Pod AM bi-weekly wherever you get your podcasts. Or watch new videos from October Pod Home Video each month, only on YouTube. Find all of Edward October's links on the World Wide Web at octoberpodvhs.com.
Stay spooky, mes amis.
There's another remarkable story of the death of a beloved grandmother and the discovery of an undeveloped roll of film that I really wanted to share with you. From Cairo News 7, a Portland woman who finds old cameras and develops forgotten film has discovered unseen photos of the Mount St. Helens eruption. I run into the big Goodwill in Southeast Portland and check all of their film cameras for exposed but undeveloped rolls of film, said Katie Dimoff, who is a photographer herself. In May, I bought an Argus C2, which would have been produced around 1938, and it had a damaged roll of Kodachrome slide film in it. Dimoff dropped it off at a Portland shop that develops vintage film. When she picked it up, a message was left on her package of photographs, and it read, "Is this from Mount St. Helens eruption?" 40 years ago, 57 people lost their lives amid raining ash throughout Washington state in the wake of Mount St. Helens explosion. Journalists and residents alike captured moments of the volcano's notorious eruption in 1980, and thousands of people to this day still watch their surreal video and chilling photos that clearly show the lateral blast that took out the north side of the mountain. But Dimoff's images show a new perspective of the plume cloud that haunted the northwest. Some of the shots showed Mount St. Helens way off in the distance with just the little puffs of ash from the beginning of the eruption, with a Longview Bridge at the Oregon-Washington border in view. So it must have been shot from just off Highway 30, Dimoff told Cairo 7 News. 2 of the shots show a larger ash cloud with John Gum Elementary School in the foreground in St. Helens, Oregon. Another shot included a family in a backyard who I'm hoping know the story of the camera. So after the Oregonian picked up Dimoff's story, a man, Mel Purvis, contacted the publication that he had read their story and recognized himself in the photos. Dimoff shared the update with Cairo 7 News about Purvis, who identified his wife, his grandmother, and son in the photo that was taken in a Eugene yard decades ago. Purvis believes the newly found Mount St. Helens photos are from his grandmother's camera. His grandmother died in 1981, and he isn't sure how her camera made it to Goodwill. That picture is one of the last I have of my grandmother, Purvis told Cairo 7 News. His mother, the daughter of his grandmother, died on Saturday. He said the discovery gave him goosebumps. A few days later, this shows up out of the blue, he said. I'm not at all a religious person, but kind of makes you wonder a little. The timing of it is remarkable, I guess. Soon the camera will be back in Purvis's family as Dimoff will be mailing it and the prints to him. Wow, my spiritual self loves the way that true story evolved and resolved.
Welcome to Spirit Sherpa, the show that helps and encourages you on your journey to unlock your magic mojo. I'm the Spirit Doctor, Kelly Sparta, and I'm here to walk you through the next stage of your spiritual awakening. I'm here to stitch together every class you've ever taken into one big world view. Join me as we explore the extent of the energy world and the depths of ourselves, all while having a great time. SpiritSherpaPodcast.com or Spirit Sherpa on your favorite podcast player.
I wouldn't put that in the category of high strangeness, but there's plenty of that when it comes to Mount St. Helens, which is no surprise considering it's this outward expression of this subterranean collusion between plates of the earth. And here are a few that came as a surprise to me as I was doing my research. The first is a story from Vancouver, Washington photographer Missy Fant. She writes about Mount St. Helens Spirit Lake right off the top in her blog. Bodies of water tend to get their names from local legends or explorers. So with a name like Spirit Lake, there has to be something behind it, right? Multiple Native American tribes had stories about this lake. All of them stated that there was some kind of evil being in or around the lake, so much so that Paul Kane, a Canadian artist, couldn't find a local guide to take him there. From demons that would lure local hunters, salmon in the lake being cursed beings, or a beast so massive it could stretch across the lake. Its hand large enough to reach out and seize boats in the lake and pull them to the depths below. Spirit Lake is still an eerie place. High up in the mountains with multiple logs covering the surface and slowly rehabilitating from the blast. She also highlighted the old man that wouldn't leave. And this is about Harry R. Truman, which I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the blast itself. But during the eruption of Lewitt or Mount St. Helens in 1980, Spirit Lake received the full lateral blast, and the lake waters formed a wave as high as 850 feet tall on the north side of the lake. Lahar and pyroclastic flows blocked the natural flow and raised the lake 197 to 206 feet and covered the surface of the lake with shattered trees. During this time, a man, his cats, and his cabin disappeared. So when you think of curmudgeonly old men, you can picture Harry R. Truman in your head. He was the type of guy that drove a pink Cadillac and would get a forest ranger drunk so that he could burn a pile of brush. Truman, 83, and his 16 cats were the caretakers at the St. Helens Lodge that was located directly in the blast zone. On May 17th, authorities tried for the last time to get Truman to abandon his lodge, but his response was, "If the mountain goes, I'm going with it." The next day, the most massive landslide in recorded history and a pyroclastic flow traveling atop the avalanche engulfed the Spirit Lake area, destroying the lake and burying the site of the lodge under 150 feet of debris. Authorities never found Truman's remains. I think I can see a smile on his face, for he lived and died in his special place, and all he would ask of the Lord for his sake in a place in eternity like Spirit Lake.
Hey everybody, Karen Rontowski here. I hate to interrupt the Curious Cat podcast, one of my favorites, but if you want to double your paranormal fun when you're done here, come check out my show, Paranormal Karen. I interview exorcists, demonologists, healers, psychics, really anyone that can make a family gathering uncomfortable is on my show. If you want to see everything I do, go to KarenRontowski.com. And I know you're thinking, that sounds hard to spell. Well, it is. I have misspelled it on hundreds of tax forms. So if that doesn't work for you, go to PsychicStandup.com or ParanormalKaren.com. There you can find my Patreon, you can book a tarot reading, you can take a tarot class, you can find everything, including my stand-up comedy clips. That's right, I've been doing stand-up for 30 years. If you go to those places, you can also see my psychic stand-up show where I mix psychic and tarot readings. Yes, the future never looked so funny. So check me out at KarenRontowski.com, ParanormalKaren.com, or PsychicStandup.com. And can someone please find me a marketing person to put all this in one place? Now back to the show.
It's not just Spirit Lake itself that's spooky. How about the thousands of floating logs that are so massive they can be seen from space? So the floating logs of Spirit Lake from NASA.gov. More than 40 years after the explosive eruption of Mount St. Helens, relics from the blast continue to haunt nearby Spirit Lake. The remains of thousands of trees that were violently stripped off the mountainside in 1980 still float on the lake in 2021. But the log mat is more than a reminder of the volcano's destruction. Scientists think it has become an important part of the lake's ecosystem. According to Jim Gowell, an environmental engineer at University of Washington's Tacoma campus, who studies the lake, logs covered more than 70% of the lake's surface immediately after the eruption. Many have since sunk, littering the lake bed with woody debris. Logs now cover about 20% of the lake, a number that's been slow to change in recent years. The log's mat location is quite dynamic, zipping across the lake's surface during the warm weather months. The logs can also move significantly over the span of a day. When the winds died down, often during the night, the logs spread out. Then as winds pick up during the day, the logs are pushed into a tight cluster. The logs can move across the lake in 30 to 60 minutes if the wind shifts, Gowell said, unfortunately trapping researchers occasionally. There are some other confounding Mount St. Helens facts that I found from Forbes magazine. People that were in earshot of the eruption reported that it was a silent event. How could that be? A third of a mountain blows sky high and it's quiet? Cran Kilpatrick, an employee of the United States Forest Service, recalled, "There was no sound to it, not a sound. It was like a silent movie and we were all in it." The reason for this discrepancy isn't clear. Some scientists believe the landslide moved at supersonic speed, pushed sound waves away, and created a quiet zone around the blast site. Others explain the quiet zone as a result of the motion and temperature of air, and to a lesser extent, upon local topography, deflecting sound waves across from the mountains. So the actual land kind of shifted the sound waves away from where your ears would capture it. So what about the rainbow trout that ended up in Spirit Lake? This is also from Forbes.com. Prior to 1980, Spirit Lake consisted of two arms that occupied what had been two valleys blocked by a natural dam of old lahars and pyroclastic flow deposits. During the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, Spirit Lake received the full impact of the lateral blast from the volcano. Blast and the debris avalanche associated with this eruption temporarily displaced much of the lake from its bed and forced lake waters as a wave as much as 850 feet above lake level on the mountain slopes along the north shoreline of the lake. The debris avalanche deposited about 350,000 acre-feet of burned trees, other plant material, volcanic ash, and volcanic debris from various origins into Spirit Lake. Nothing could have survived there. Even so, just weeks after the eruption, biologists found fish. Long suspected to be the result of rogue fishermen that planted the fish, genetic tests suggest the fish actually are the landlocked descendants of trouts that somehow made it into the lake after the eruption. So speaking of high strangeness, I'd be the worst podcaster ever if I didn't tell you about the mythical beasts of Mount St. Helens. The three most famous are the Sasquatch, Ape Bigfoot, the Thunderbird, and the Bat Squatch. Wait, you haven't heard of Bat Squatch? Yeah, you not only will hear about it, but you could even dress like it thanks to the Willamette Weekly. Fair warning, I'll be recording an entire episode about Sasquatch and the Cascade Mountain Range because there are so many incidents of it. But I will share this one little nugget with you in light of Mount St. Helens, because Mount St. Helens has two geographic locations that are named after Bigfoot: Ape Cave, Ape Valley. The ape in that is because of an incident that occurred, a battle between Bigfoots. But we're not talking about that today. What we're going to talk about is something from Mysterious Universe. They say in their article, I don't even want to tell you the title because I don't want to spoil it. So they tell the official story of Mount St. Helens eruption, and they say, now it's time to take a look at the unofficial story. In many respects, it parallels the claims of U.S. military retrievals of extraterrestrial bodies in the deserts near Roswell, New Mexico, in the summer of 1947. There are stories that the entire operation to recover possibly 5 or 6 Bigfoot from the pulverized remains of Mount St. Helens was coordinated by the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The U.S. ACE notes that its role is to deliver vital public and military engineering services, partnering in peace and war to strengthen our nation's security, energize the economy, and reduce risks from disasters. In other words, the U.S. ACE would indeed have been the ideal body to have played a central role in the recoveries. Several of the bodies, Bigfoot researchers have been told, were reportedly found on the 105-mile-long Cowlitz River in the Cascade Mountains. Military Chinook helicopters were said to have been flown into the area and later exited with the corpses of several large, hairy, ape-like animals hanging from powerful nets strung beneath the helicopters. Their destination remains tantalizingly and frustratingly unknown. In 2012, a story surfaced from a former National Guardsman who maintained that he was actually on site when at least some of the Bigfoot recoveries occurred. And under cover of extensive secrecy, he said this to people. Incredibly, he claimed that not all of the retrieved Bigfoot were dead. Some were burned and injured, and a few critically so. Particularly outrageous is the claim that the military had assistance from 1 or 2 unharmed Bigfoot that helped guide military personnel to the site where the injured hairy giants lay. There's absolutely no doubt that the stories of the dead and injured Bigfoot of the Mount St. Helens disaster of May 1980 are fascinating. Admittedly, very problematic, however, is the glaring fact that not one of the alleged retired or former military personnel that have divulged such fantastic stories has been willing to reveal their name and or proof of their employment at a military or government level. Unless or until such a thing occurs, the story will likely remain as hazy and controversial as it is sensational and potentially groundbreaking. Okay, and I'm going to interrupt to say maybe they'll listen to Curious Cat, Cascadia, and that will be the impetus that pushes them over the top and makes them want to divulge their details. So if you are out there and that was maybe a story that your father told you, your grandfather told you, you can email us and even be anonymous. We'll hold your secrets tight to our chest. And you'll find the email where you can reach us in the show notes. So I hope we get a whistleblower. Our second story of a crazy creature that may or may not exist around Mount St. Helens comes from Weird US, and it's the story of the Thunderbird. And they say in their online article, which I have the links for in the show notes if you want to read it yourself, and all their other amazing articles. They say about the Thunderbird, virtually every Native American culture has stories of a giant magical bird, which most call the Thunderbird. The name comes from the sound the bird's wings make when in full flight, like thunderclaps, which I never knew before. The Thunderbird's wings, it was said, were larger than 2 canoes and the feathers the size of canoe paddles. Their eyes glowed red and lightning shot out of their claws. At least 2 Thunderbirds flew in Washington, one in the Cascade Mountains and the other in the Olympic Mountains of the Puget Sound. We're going to talk about the first bird here since this is a Mount St. Helens episode. And yes, this is the one that lived at the time inside Mount St. Helens. It created earthquakes and volcanic eruptions when it rolled over in its sleep. The rest of the time, it lived at the bottom of Spirit Lake at the foot of the mountain. The native people saw the water bubble and froth when the Thunderbird was angry. According to one legend, this bird attacked many other creatures until the raven killed it, after which the Thunderbird's body fell into the Columbia River, where it formed several islands. Other people believe it's still alive and it's responsible for the recent eruptions of the mountain. The local people were afraid of Spirit Lake because of the Thunderbird and the other spirit beings that inhabited the area and kept a healthy distance away from the lake. When Mount St. Helens erupted in the 1840s, artist Paul Kane traveled to the mountain to sketch and paint it. Upon his return a few days later, the locals ran away from him. Their belief in the powers of the spirits there were so strong, they thought Kane was a ghost. Our third and final mystical creature that may or may not dwell in the Mount St. Helens area is bat squatch. And I linked to the article from Willamette Weekly. And they say in the article, you might recognize bat squatch from the label of Rogue's hazy IPA beer of the same name. While there are many tales of bat squatch, the brewery writes in its description of the beer, they are all a bit hazy on the details. First spotted in the 1980s near Mount St. Helens, the elusive winged humanoid is said to resemble a flying primate with leathery black wings that span up to 50 feet. In 1994, the Tacoma News Tribune detailed an alleged encounter by a teenager near Buckley, Washington. According to that report, the animal had clawed feet, blue-tinted fur, the face of a wolf, and wings as wide as the road. And that's a quote. They tell us how to make a costume to be like bat squatch. First, you need a Bigfoot costume. So that's a big buy right there. And they say to discard the head. Then you wear a wolf mask and you add some bat wings and some drywall stilts and bang, you are bat squatch. I'd like to close this episode with a ghost story. I found this account in blogs, newspaper articles, and a book called Haunted Washington, retold by Adam Woog. So rumor has it a woman in white haunts the St. Helens region. She's been encountered hitching rides up and down the roads near the peak. When a driver stops to help, she gets into the back seat, and then, during the course of casual conversation, she predicts that the mountain will erupt within a specific 2-day period. Then she just disappears while the car is in motion. The Seattle Post Intelligencer, a police chief from nearby Morton, said, We picked up a rumor that some people picked up a lady with a white gown on. She gave her warning, and when they looked in the back seat, she was gone. And they were going 60 miles an hour down the road. I don't know what they were smoking or drinking, which sounds so unprofessional of me, but kind of funny, huh? Yes, nature is powerful. It's wondrous, magical. A moment standing in the shadow of a mountain or at the edge of a riverbed shrinks the ego and heals the soul. I hope Cascadia inspires you to dust off your backpack and venture into the wild. Who knows what mysteries lie ahead on the trail? If you happen to encounter something spooky or supernatural, drop us a line at curious_cat_podcast@icloud.com. Maybe your story will be featured in an upcoming episode. Yes, we're exploring the rumor-riddled Cascade Mountain Range, a land of fire and ice, from Sasquatch to UFOs to remote viewing to bottomless pits to ancient battles over good and evil. Find new episodes on the regular Curious Cat stream. Original art for Cascadia by Nora's Unnamed Photos. Find and follow them on Instagram. If you venture out into nature, be safe out there. Until next time, stay curious. I love you.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.